Hey guys! Tonight on History Podcast, we drift back into a world unlike any other, the shimmering city of Tenochtitlan, where gardens floated on a vast lake and life moved to the rhythm of paddles and temple bells. You'll wander the quiet canals, taste warm maize tortillas, and even meet a smiling little axolotl or two. Don't worry, you probably won't survive farming here yourself, but that's the beauty of this sleepy journey. You don't have to. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here on History Podcast. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Tonight, we drift back in time to one of the most breathtaking cities the world has ever seen, Tenochtitlan, the shimmering island capital of the Aztec Empire. You stand on a stone causeway that stretches across a vast lake, the morning mist curling around your ankles as the water laps gently below. Ahead, you see what looks like a green patchwork quilt laid across the water itself, floating gardens, chinampas that somehow refuse to sink. It's the sort of sight that makes you think, wow, humans will build anything if they're hungry enough. As you step closer, you notice the hum of daily life around you. Farmers poling canoes filled with squash and chilies, women balancing baskets of maize, and children splashing in the shallows. The air is filled with the scent of damp earth and fresh blossoms. You probably wouldn't survive here more than a few hours, to be honest. The sun is relentless, the mosquitoes know no mercy, and the nearest Starbucks is about 500 years in the future. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step onto one of the chinampas, and the ground under your sandals feels springy, almost alive, as if the earth itself is floating. In a way, it is. These artificial islands are built layer upon layer, reeds at the bottom, lake mud piled on top, and willow trees anchoring the whole thing in place. It looks fragile, but it's stable enough to grow enough food to feed an empire. Historians still argue whether chinampas were invented as early as 500 CE or later perfected by the Aztecs, but either way you can see their genius in every row of crops. Your eyes follow the neat lines of maize stalks reaching toward the sky, their leaves whispering in the breeze. Between the rows, beans twist upward, clinging to the maize like they're best friends who never want to be apart. And at your feet, squash vines creep along the soil, their broad leaves shading the earth and keeping it cool. The three sisters of agriculture, maize, beans, and squash, form a perfect trio, making sure no square inch of chinampa soil goes to waste. From here, you glance across the glittering water and see the city itself, Tenochtitlan, rising out of the lake like a dream. Its temples gleam in the sunlight, white stone steps leading up to pyramids that seem to touch the clouds. Canoes slip through canals like gondolas in Venice, only here the passengers are merchants carrying cacao beans, priests in white robes, and perhaps a noble or two enjoying the ride. You pause, soaking it in. The gardens stretch for miles, a green carpet over blue water, so dense that from a distance they look like solid land. And yet, every few minutes, a canoe glides past, breaking the illusion. You catch the call of a heron overhead and the splash of a fish below, reminding you that this is still very much a lake. One farmer notices your curiosity and waves you over. His canoe is loaded with amaranth, its tiny crimson flowers glowing in the sun. He explains, in slow words you barely understand, that amaranth isn't just food, it's sacred. The Aztecs bake it into offerings for the gods, sometimes mixed with honey and seeds. You nod politely, wondering if he'd mind letting you taste a piece, but then you remember you don't have the Aztec stomach for it. Best not to risk it. As you continue along the chinampa, you notice how meticulously everything is organized. little channels of water cut between plots, allowing canoes to glide right up to the crops. The air is cooler here, the water reflecting sunlight upward, while willows sway gently overhead, their roots digging deep into the lake bed to hold everything together. Every so often, you catch sight of a scarecrow, its ragged cloak fluttering in the breeze. You can't help but chuckle. It looks about as intimidating as a tired uncle at a family barbecue, and yet, it works. Birds keep their distance, except for the occasional brave duck who quacks disapprovingly as you pass. The calm rhythm of the place lulls you into a slower pace. You imagine the sound of the farmer's paddles dipping into the water, the rustle of maize leaves, the distant murmur of temple bells calling the faithful. It's strangely peaceful, almost hypnotic. And as you look around, you realize you're standing in the middle of a masterpiece. Not just a garden, not just farmland, but a living engine of survival and beauty. Tenochtitlan isn't just built on the lake, it is the lake. And you're right at the heart of it. You follow a narrow earthen path, the soil cool beneath your sandals, as the chinampas begin to reveal their patterns in greater detail. From above, they must look like green puzzle pieces scattered across the glittering lake. But here on the ground, they feel more like a maze. Farmers move with a practiced rhythm, slipping in and out of canoes, tending to crops as if the whole place runs on an invisible clock. You wonder if they ever take a day off, and then you remember, in an empire this size, food waits for no one. The first thing you notice is how astonishingly neat the chinampas are. Each plot is about 30 feet wide and maybe 300 feet long, though to your drowsy eyes they stretch forever. Straight rows of maize stand like little soldiers, and between them, farmers crouch low, checking the soil with careful fingers. A woman nearby bends to pull weeds, her hair tied back with a strip of cloth, while a boy tosses lake water over the roots with a clay pot, his bare feet splashing in the shallows. Historians still argue whether chinampas should be called floating gardens at all. Some insist they're more like anchored rafts, while others claim they were permanent extensions of the shoreline. You don't need a scholarly debate to see they're working brilliantly, lush, green, and buzzing with life. The earth smells rich and damp, like the world's best compost pile. You pause to watch a farmer use a long wooden pole to gently push his canoe forward through a narrow canal. The movement is so smooth, so quiet, it feels like you've slipped into a dream. He reaches the edge of a chinampa and begins unloading baskets of beans, their bright green pods glistening in the sun. You imagine how many baskets like this must pass through Tenochtitlan every single day. Enough to feed hundreds of thousands of people, without refrigeration, without tractors, without even metal tools. Honestly, you'd barely survive trying to grow a houseplant. A sudden splash makes you turn. A heron darts its beak into the water, pulling up a wriggling fish, while a child laughs nearby, clapping his hands as if the bird were part of the entertainment. The boy's mother, still bent over her work, gives a weary smile but doesn't look up. You crouch down to run your fingers through the soil. It's soft but firm, a mix of lake mud and rotting vegetation that smells faintly of fish. This is the magic of the chinampas, dredging up the rich bottom of the lake and piling it onto woven mats of reeds until the island becomes sturdy enough to support crops. The system doesn't just grow food, it keeps renewing itself. Every so often, more mud is scooped up, and the gardens stay fertile year after year. It's like nature's own cheat code. Nearby, a man pauses his work long enough to show you a handful of tiny, bright seeds. He explains that they're chia, prized not just as food, but as tribute. You smile, realizing you've just discovered the ancient ancestor of the modern chia pudding craze. Somewhere, an Aztec. As you wander further, you notice that each chinampa feels slightly different. Some glow with the deep yellow of squash blossoms, while others shimmer with the pale green of amaranth leaves. One plot even has flowers, bright marigolds planted not for food, but for beauty and for ceremonies. Their petals scatter in the breeze, catching the light like tiny sparks. A canoe full of reeds passes by, the poles stacked so high they sway dangerously. You half expect them to tip, but the paddler balances them with the ease of someone who's done this since childhood. You wonder how many of these reeds will soon become new mats, ready to expand the gardens even further. The air is filled with sound, the distant beat of a drum from the city center, the calls of farmers greeting one another across the water, the soft lap of canoes moving through the canals. Every so often you catch the faint ringing of temple bells carried on the wind. It's a soundtrack both lively and calming, like nature's version of lo-fi beats to study, or in your case, to sleep, to. You pass a cluster of willows, their roots tangling deep into the lake bed, their branches swaying gently overhead. They're not just for shade, they're the anchors that keep the chinampas from drifting away. Some say the trees were chosen because of their spiritual symbolism, their long, drooping branches a reminder of the thin line between water and earth. Others argue it was simply good engineering. Historians, of course, are still debating. You pause to watch a farmer sprinkle water over young maize shoots, the droplets catching the sun like 1,000 tiny mirrors. A sudden gust carries the earthy scent of wet soil and fresh leaves, and for a moment, you feel the calm rhythm of life here. The gardens don't just feed bodies, they feed the soul. And as you make your way toward the next chinampa, you realize something. Tenochtitlan's beauty doesn't come only from its towering temples or bustling markets. It comes from this: quiet, patient work, row by row, plant by plant, in gardens that float on water like a dream. The canal opens wide before you, its surface shining like polished obsidian. You step into a canoe, the wooden hull rocking gently under your weight. The farmer from earlier hands you a pole, but you wisely decline. With your coordination, you'd probably send the whole thing spinning in circles until someone fished you out with a net. Instead, you settle into the bottom of the boat, letting him guide you smoothly along the waterway. The air here feels cooler, shaded by tall willows that lean over the canal like watchful guardians. Their branches trail along the surface, leaving ripples that sparkle in the sunlight. The paddle dips with a slow rhythm, swish, lift, drip, like a lullaby in liquid form. If you weren't already on a history podcast designed to help you fall asleep, you'd probably be nodding off anyway. Canoes glide past you in both directions, carrying loads of maize, squash, and fragrant bundles of herbs. Some are piled so high with flowers they look like floating gardens themselves. You pass a group of women balancing clay pots filled with water, their chatter carrying softly over the lake. A few children splash in the shallows, daring each other to swim out just a little farther until a stern uncle's voice warns them back. Historians still argue whether these canals were laid out with a strict master plan or whether they evolved naturally, expanding as the city grew. Either way, the result is mesmerizing. Graceful lanes of water crisscrossing the chinampas, turning the whole valley into a living labyrinth. As your canoe drifts along, you notice the details that make this place feel alive. Bright red dragonflies hover over the surface, their wings flashing like rubies. A frog croaks from the reeds, answered by another across the canal, their calls bouncing like sleepy echoes. Overhead, a heron glides silently, its shadow sliding across your lap. You're pretty sure if you reached out right now, you could touch the calm itself. Your guide slows the canoe beside a chinampa bursting with flowers, marigolds, dahlias, and a few that look like fiery red stars. He explains that many of these blooms aren't for eating at all, but for decoration, rituals, and offerings. The Aztecs loved color. They saw flowers as symbols of beauty and even of truth. One poet wrote that life was fleeting, but flowers gave us a glimpse of eternity. You nod thoughtfully, though part of you is still trying to decide if those fiery red ones are secretly plotting to sneeze pollen into your nose. Another canoe passes, this one stacked with cages of turkeys. The birds gobble indignantly, clearly unimpressed with their boat ride. You stifle a chuckle, imagining what kind of commentary they'd provide if they could. Probably something like, "Excuse me, sir, this is not first class." You lean over the side of the canoe and glimpse the lake bed below, shadows of fish darting among the reeds, a flash of silver here, a ripple there. The water smells faintly of mud and lilies, a reminder that this city lives in harmony with the lake rather than fighting against it. The farmer points out a cluster of canoes gathering farther ahead. It's a floating meeting spot where neighbors share news and sometimes trade small goods before heading into the city markets. You imagine the soft hum of conversations, the gentle laughter, the low creak of wooden boats rubbing against each other. It feels less like traffic and more like a family reunion that happens every day. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the hollow thump of a drum, steady and patient. It's probably coming from the heart of Tenochtitlan, where a ceremony is underway. The sound drifts over the water, blending with the calls of birds and the gentle splash of paddles. Together, they weave a soundtrack so soothing it could put the whole lake to sleep. A quirky thought slips into your mind. The Aztecs didn't have horses until the Spanish arrived, so all of this, every ounce of food, every bundle of flowers, every turkey, was transported by canoe or carried by human porters. You look around at the hundreds of boats bobbing across the lake and realize this is a city built on the strength of backs and the rhythm of paddles. No wheels, no hooves, just water and willpower. Honestly, your Fitbit would explode just trying to keep up. The canoe glides past a cluster of reeds, where a few children have fashioned tiny toy boats out of leaves. They push them along the canal with sticks, giggling when one tips over. You smile, realizing some things never change. Kids will always find a way to turn chores into games. As the sun begins to climb higher, the air warms, carrying the scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers. The farmer eases the canoe toward another chinampa, his paddle dipping one last time. You feel the boat nudge gently against the shore. He offers a hand to help you step out, and as your feet touch solid ground again, you glance back at the water. It ripples calmly behind you, a mirror reflecting the beauty of this floating world. The moment your sandals touch the chinampa again, you're greeted by the warmth of morning light stretching across the fields. The gardens are fully awake now, and you realize you've walked straight into the daily heartbeat of Tenochtitlan. Farmers move with quiet determination, their steps steady on the springy soil. Their canoes nudging the edges of the plots like patient horses waiting for their riders. You pause near a family working together on a patch of maize. The father digs gently into the earth with a wooden hoe, the kind carved from a single piece of wood, polished smooth from years of use. The mother carefully plants beans beside the young maize stalks, tucking them into the soil as if putting children to bed. A boy, no more than 8, scatters squash seeds along the base of the rows. It's a perfect picture of teamwork, like a relay race, but the baton is food, and dropping it isn't an option. Historians still argue whether the chinampas were farmed mainly by commoners under noble supervision, or whether nobles themselves occasionally visited their plots to show face. But standing here, watching the sweat glisten on brows and the soil cling to fingers, it feels safe to say this was the work of ordinary hands, powered by extraordinary persistence. A rooster crows from a canoe not far away, startling you slightly. You didn't realize chickens had boat privileges. The farmer notices your surprise and chuckles softly. He thinks he owns the lake, he says with a shrug. And to be fair, the bird struts like it does. The morning tasks unfold with calm efficiency. Some workers dredge mud from the canals, hauling it up in woven baskets to spread across the chinampas. The smell is earthy, pungent, and oddly comforting, like the world's strongest potting soil. This regular dredging keeps the plots rich in nutrients, ensuring harvests that never seem to fail. You're impressed. Meanwhile, you once forgot to water a succulent for 2 weeks, and it staged a dramatic death scene. Nearby, a woman kneels to collect bright red chilies, placing them carefully in a basket. She hums softly as she works, her tune blending with the buzzing of bees that dart among the flowers. Every now and then, She wipes her brow with the edge of her tunic, then keeps going, steady as the sun rising above the valley. You stop to watch a pair of men reinforcing the edge of a chinampa with reeds. They push the poles deep into the lake bed, weaving them together like a fence. Over time, the reeds will trap silt and vegetation, strengthening the edges. It's the kind of engineering that looks simple but requires years of practice. One man jokes to the other, and they both laugh, a light, weary sound, but warm all the same. The air is alive with details, the rhythmic creak of wooden tools, the splash of water poured onto thirsty soil, the distant calls of traders heading toward the marketplace. Overhead, the sun climbs higher, and you notice the way the light glitters across the canals like scattered jewels. You squint, half blinded, half awed. A farmer offers you a taste of something from his basket. Tiny, round tomatoes no bigger than marbles. You pop one into your mouth, and the burst of flavor surprises you. Sweet, tart, and fresh, like sunshine condensed into a bite. You nod in appreciation, and he grins, clearly proud. You make a mental note. Never underestimate the power of a small tomato. Farther along, a woman tends to a bed of herbs, epazote, sage, and something that smells a bit like mint. She explains that many of these aren't just for flavor, they're for medicine. A sprig of epazote helps with stomach troubles, while sage smoke is used in purification rituals. You nod solemnly, though privately, you wonder if a few handfuls of epazote could handle the consequences of modern fast food. Children dart between the rows, chasing each other until a stern voice calls them back to carry water jars. They groan dramatically, but you can see the spark of mischief in their eyes. Even here, where life demands constant work, kids still find ways to play. You smile, remembering the toy boats you saw earlier, and think, maybe childhood has always been a balance of chores and fun. The sun warms your shoulders as you keep walking, the sounds of the morning weaving into a gentle hum. It's not loud, not chaotic, but steady, like the world's most soothing alarm clock, waking the gardens to another day. And you realize, as you glance back at the neat rows behind you, that every tiny act, each seed planted, each basket of mud dredged, threads together into the fabric of survival. Without this morning rhythm, the empire wouldn't stand. Without these patient hands, the temples you glimpsed earlier would be empty. You take a deep breath, the smell of earth and chilies filling your lungs, and let the calm of the chinampas settle into your bones. You keep walking along the edge of the chinampa, watching as the morning routines give way to the more methodical, almost meditative work of maintaining the floating gardens. It's here that you begin to notice just how ingenious the whole system really is. At first glance, it looks like ordinary farmland, but as you watch the farmers bend, dig, and dredge, you realize you're standing on one of the greatest feats of agricultural engineering in human history, without a single tractor, irrigation pump, or Miracle-Gro fertilizer in sight. A farmer waves you over, his hands stained dark with mud. He shows you how he scrapes thick black sludge from the bottom of the canal and spreads it over the soil like butter on bread. The smell hits you instantly, rich, earthy, a little fishy, but not unpleasant. This muck is the lifeblood of the chinampas. It renews the soil, keeping it fertile season after season. You crouch down to watch, trying not to think about how heavy the basket must feel. He makes it look effortless, though you suspect your arms would give out after the first scoop. Historians still argue whether the chinampas were truly floating islands or if, over time, they became so anchored by willows and reeds that they turned into permanent extensions of the lake bed. From where you stand, with your sandals sinking slightly into the springy ground, it feels like both, a paradox of floating and fixed, as if the earth itself is balancing between two worlds. Nearby, a pair of workers weave long reeds into a fence-like wall along the chinampa's edge. The reeds are stacked and tied in place, creating a barrier to keep the soil from washing away. Over the years, these woven walls trap more mud and plants, slowly thickening the island. You're struck by the thought that the chinampas are never truly finished. They're living projects, always growing, always being reshaped. As you move along, you see willow trees planted at regular intervals along the banks. Their roots dig deep into the lake bed, locking the chinampa in place. Their branches sway gently overhead, creating pockets of shade that cool the crops. A farmer tells you the willows are more than anchors. They also serve as living markers, helping people measure the size of each plot. You nod, realizing it's a clever system. Nature's rulers planted right into the soil. You pause to watch another farmer tend to his maize. He uses a pointed wooden stick, a simple tool sharpened at one end, to poke small holes in the soil. Into each hole, he drops a bean seed, then presses the earth closed with the side of his foot. At the base of the maize stalks, he plants squash, their broad leaves soon to sprawl outward like living umbrellas, shading the ground to keep it moist. It's a brilliant partnership, maize providing height, beans offering nitrogen, squash protecting the soil. You smile, thinking that if vegetables had social media, this would be the original squad goals. A quirky tidbit slips into your mind. Some scholars believe the Aztecs even sprinkled ground-up fish or lake plants into the soil as natural fertilizer. Others argue that wasn't necessary because the lake muck was already nutrient-rich. Either way, the crops here look healthy enough to make a modern farmer jealous. As the sun climbs higher, the air fills with the mingled scents of damp earth and blooming flowers. A group of women arrives with baskets of seedlings, tiny maize shoots ready to be transplanted into the soil. They kneel together, laughing softly as they work, their movements synchronized like dancers in a slow, graceful performance. You wonder how many generations of hands have repeated this same act, morning after morning, year after year. Not far away, a farmer hums a tune while reinforcing the corner of his chinampa with fresh reeds. You catch only fragments of the melody, but it lingers in your ears, a soft, steady rhythm that seems to blend with the sound of paddles dipping in the canal. The whole place feels like it's breathing with you. Inhale, exhale, work, rest, dig, plant. You glance at your own hands and laugh quietly to yourself. Back home, you probably wouldn't trust yourself to keep a basil plant alive on the windowsill, and here you are, watching people feed an empire out of floating gardens. It's humbling and a little funny. A canoe glides past, piled with reeds that will soon become new mats for expansion. The paddler raises a hand in greeting, his face glowing with sweat. You wave back, feeling a strange kinship with someone whose world is so different from yours, yet whose smile looks exactly the same. By now, the sun is fully overhead, and you can feel the heat building. The air shimmers faintly above the soil, but the chinampas don't wither. Their roots drink deep from the lake below, immune to the kind of drought that would devastate other fields. It's no wonder the Aztecs thrived here. The gardens weren't just clever, they were nearly indestructible. And as you step carefully between rows of maize, beans, and squash, you realize this isn't just farming, this is an art form. Every reed, every scoop of mud, every willow tree is part of a masterpiece, one that kept Tenochtitlan alive and thriving, floating strong in the heart of the lake. And as you step carefully between rows of maize, beans, and squash, you realize this isn't just farming, this is an art form. Every reed, every scoop of mud, every willow tree is part of a masterpiece, one that kept Tenochtitlan alive and thriving, floating strong in the heart of the lake. The heat of the day is settling over the chinampas now, and with it comes a shift in the rhythm of life. Farmers load up their canoes, balancing baskets brimming with produce, shiny tomatoes, bright chilies, bundles of amaranth, and round squashes that glisten like polished gourds. You step into a canoe with one family, curious to see where all this food is headed. The paddle dips gently into the water, carrying you down a canal that grows busier the farther you travel. Boats filled with every imaginable color and shape bump gently against each other like floating market stalls. It feels like a morning commute, only instead of cars honking, you hear the soft slap of paddles and the occasional turkey complaining about its ride. Soon the canal widens, and you see it, the marketplace bursting with energy. Canoes dock along the shore as farmers unload their baskets. The air is a swirl of scents. Fresh herbs, roasted maize cakes, fish pulled from the lake that morning. You inhale deeply, the mix of earthy and savory smells making your stomach growl, even though you're not sure you'd trust your own digestive system with 15th century food. Historians still argue whether Tlatelolco, the great market of Tenochtitlan's twin city, was the largest in the Americas, or simply one of the most organized. Either way, the scene before you suggests immense might be an understatement. Thousands of people bustle through rows of goods, from food to pottery to brightly colored textiles. You can almost hear the hum of voices blending into one long, steady note, like a choir that never stops singing. You pause at a stall displaying cacao beans, tiny dark treasures once used as currency. The merchant carefully counts them into a customer's basket, as if handing over gold coins. A curious thought strikes you. What if your morning coffee cost actual cacao beans instead of dollars? You'd probably guard your pantry like a dragon. A few stalls down, you see baskets piled high with chilies in every shade of red, green, and yellow. A woman crushes some into a paste with a stone mortar, the smell so sharp it makes your nose twitch. She notices your expression and smiles knowingly. "It will wake you faster than the dawn," she says, offering a dab on the tip of a tortilla. You hesitate, imagining yourself coughing dramatically in front of a crowd, and politely decline. At another stall, bundles of herbs hang in the sun, epizode, sage, and mysterious leaves you can't name. A healer explains that some are for cooking, others for medicine, and a few for rituals. She picks up a bundle of marigolds, telling you they're not only beautiful, but also offerings to the gods, their petals carrying prayers skyward. You nod, touched by the thought that flowers could be messengers. One quirky sight catches your eye, a stall selling rabbit pelts alongside dried fish and clay figurines. The merchant explains that rabbits were not only eaten, but also raised on the chinampas for fur. You smile at the thought of little rabbit colonies nibbling quietly among the maize, unaware of their dual purpose. You wander further, your eyes feasting on pyramids of tomatoes, piles of avocados so glossy they look polished, and baskets of squash blossoms glowing like tiny suns. Women carry stacks of tortillas wrapped in cloth, still warm from the comal, their scent drifting temptingly through the crowd. Somewhere nearby, a drummer taps a steady beat, adding a gentle soundtrack to the buzz of voices. Historians still debate how strictly the marketplace was regulated, whether officials kept detailed watch over weights, measures, and prices. From what you see, there's plenty of order despite the chaos. People line up patiently, coins and cacao beans exchanging hands with surprising calm. You can't help but think of modern supermarkets, long lines, impatient sighs, someone sneaking into the express checkout with way more than 10 items. Here, the rhythm feels slower, more patient, as if everyone knows there's enough to go around. You pause to rest near a fountain where children splash water on their faces. A group of musicians passes, carrying drums and rattles, their steps keeping time with the beat. Their presence makes the market feel less like a chore and more like a festival. As the sun climbs higher, the crowd thickens. You catch snippets of laughter, bargaining, and even the occasional playful argument over the best squash in the pile. The air is warm, filled with the mingled scents of maize tortillas, roasted fish, and crushed chilies. And as you step back into your canoe, balancing a small basket of maize a farmer insisted you take, you realize the market isn't just a place of trade. It's the pulse of Tenochtitlan, a daily gathering that keeps the empire alive, one floating basket at a time. You leave the marketplace behind, canoe gliding quietly through a canal lined with willows, and soon you're surrounded by chinampas that look different from the others. These plots aren't filled only with maize and chilies, but with plants that carry a heavier weight, spiritual meaning. You slow your steps as you disembark, drawn by the bright blooms and the faint scent of incense lingering in the warm air. the first thing you notice is a field of marigolds, their golden petals glowing as if the sun itself had fallen into the soil. Farmers tend them carefully, clipping blossoms and arranging them into bundles. A woman explains softly that marigolds are offerings for ceremonies, their color believed to guide spirits toward the altars. You crouch to touch a petal. It feels fragile, like paper, and yet carries centuries of tradition in its bloom. Nearby, another chinampa is filled with amaranth, its crimson stalks standing tall and proud. You learn that amaranth isn't just food, it's sacred. In certain rituals, the seeds were ground and mixed with honey to form small figurines offered to the gods. Historians still argue whether these rituals were more symbolic or whether they carried deeper sacrificial meaning. You tilt your head thoughtfully, wondering if honey amaranth figures taste as good as they sound, though you wisely keep that thought to yourself. You pass a patch of white sage, its silvery leaves shimmering in the sun. A priest in a white robe explains that sage smoke is used to purify spaces, to clear away unseen heaviness. He waves a small bundle in the air, and the faint herbal scent drifts toward you, calming and grounding. For a moment, you close your eyes, breathing it in. If there was ever a natural Aztec version of aromatherapy, this is it. A little farther along, you see cacao trees, their broad leaves providing cool shade. The farmer tending them explains that cacao beans are sacred gifts, used not only for trade, but also in sacred drinks reserved for priests, nobles, and warriors. He grins knowingly as he tells you the Aztecs mixed cacao with chili and water, not sugar. You raise an eyebrow, silently admitting that your modern sweet tooth would probably protest. Then there's maize, the most sacred of all. You find a small shrine on one chinampa where stalks of maize are tied together, offerings of flowers placed at their base. A woman kneels, whispering a prayer of thanks for the harvest. You stand quietly nearby, not wanting to intrude, and notice that even the children watching her are solemn, their playfulness paused in respect. The sounds here are different, less bustling than the market, more hushed, as though the plants themselves command reverence. The breeze carries the rustle of maize leaves, the faint clink of clay jars, and the rhythmic hum of prayers whispered across the water. Somewhere in the distance, a conch shell horn sounds, its note long and low, echoing across the valley like a call to pause and listen. You walk slowly, taking it all in. The flowers, the herbs, the sacred crops. They turn the chinampas into something more than farmland. They are living altars, places where survival and spirituality meet. You think back to the tomatoes you tasted earlier, the chilies you nearly dared to try, and realize every bite of food here carries a prayer, every bloom a story, every seed a promise. As you step back into your canoe, the faint scent of sage clings to your clothes, the golden marigolds glowing in your memory. You drift onward, the gardens behind you fading into the shimmering water, but their sacred hush following like a gentle echo. The canoe drifts out of the sacred gardens, and the atmosphere shifts again. The water widens, sunlight dances across its ripples, and the hum of daily life swells around you. The chinampas here aren't solemn altars, but lively homesteads, brimming with laughter, work, and the little details that turn a city into a home. On one chinampa, a man kneels at the edge, casting a net into the water. You hear the faint splash as he pulls it back in, silver fish wriggling in the morning light. A boy runs to help, nearly toppling into the canal in his excitement. His mother shakes her head with a smile, clearly used to these near misses. You chuckle softly. It's comforting to know that parental exasperation has been universal for centuries. A little farther along, women kneel at the water's edge, washing clothes against smooth stones. The sound of fabric slapping wet rock joins the chorus of bird calls overhead. You notice one of them laughing as a curious duck waddles far too close, quacking indignantly when shooed away. The smell of fresh laundry, herbal soaps made from local plants, floats on the breeze, mingling with the scent of damp earth. Historians still argue whether all families lived full-time on the chinampas or if many commuted daily from the city center. But from the look of hammocks strung between willows and clay cooking pots simmering over small fires, it's clear that at least some people make these floating gardens their permanent home. You catch the sound of children splashing in a shallow canal, chasing each other through the reeds. Their shrieks of laughter echo across the water, while an older sister keeps a watchful eye, occasionally joining the game with mock seriousness. The little ones scoop up tiny axolotls, their slippery bodies wriggling in cupped hands, before carefully letting them go. You grin. Nothing says childhood quite like catching little creatures you're absolutely not supposed to keep. Farther down, you pass a chinampa where a group of men sit mending fishing nets. Their hands move with practiced ease, weaving the cords together while trading jokes and stories. One bursts out laughing, slapping his knee so hard the net nearly falls into the water. You don't catch the joke, but you laugh anyway. Sometimes joy doesn't need translation. A priest passes by on a canoe, his white robe catching the sunlight. He raises a hand in blessing toward a family planting young maize shoots, and they bow their heads respectfully. His presence is a quiet reminder that even here, among laughter and chores, the gods are never far from mind. You notice small clay stoves set up on several chinampas, their fires sending thin curls of smoke into the air. Women bend over them, patting maize dough into tortillas, the gentle slap of their hands rhythmic and steady. The smell is heavenly, warm, nutty, and comforting. Your stomach growls, reminding you that history might feed your mind, but tortillas feed your soul. A quirky scene unfolds nearby. A man patiently teaching a parrot to mimic words. The bird squawks something that sounds suspiciously like a scolding phrase, and the family bursts into laughter. The man grins proudly, explaining that parrots are prized for their voices, a feathered echo of human chatter. You tilt your head, wondering how many neighborhood secrets the bird has accidentally revealed. Historians still debate whether daily life on the chinampas was more communal or more private. From what you see, the answer is both. Families tend their own plots, but constantly call to neighbors, share tools, and trade baskets of herbs. Canoes drift by, carrying not just food, but gossip, jokes, and songs. As the sun warms the air, you pause to watch a group of girls string bright flowers into garlands. They giggle as they crown each other, their laughter floating across the water. One waves at you shyly, and you wave back, the simple connection making the floating city feel even more alive. You lean back in the canoe, letting the gentle rocking soothe you. The sounds of family life, the splash of nets, the slap of tortillas, the chatter of children, form a lullaby more comforting than any modern playlist. And as you glide onward, you realize the chinampas aren't just fields of maize or platforms of reeds. They're homes, villages, and playgrounds. They're places where life unfolds with joy, work, and ritual, all balanced gently on the waters of the Great Lake. The canoe nudges against the edge of a chinampa, where the air is thick with the smell of roasting maize and the sharp tang of chilies. You climb out carefully, your sandals sinking slightly into the soft soil, and instantly your senses are flooded with the aromas of Aztec cuisine. If the marketplace was a feast for the eyes, this is a feast for the stomach. A woman greets you with a warm smile and gestures toward a stone comal set over glowing coals. She pats a ball of maize dough between her hands, flattening it into a perfect circle before laying it onto the hot surface. The tortilla puffs up gently, releasing a nutty, comforting scent that makes your stomach rumble so loudly you hope no one noticed. She hands you one, still warm, sprinkled with a dash of salt and a smear of bean paste. The flavor is simple, earthy, and deeply satisfying. You nod in gratitude, chewing slowly as you glance around. Everywhere you look, food is being prepared. Another family stirs a bubbling pot of chili stew, the red broth glistening under the sun. Children sit cross-legged, tearing into roasted squash slices, their faces smeared with orange. Historians still argue how much variety the average Aztec family enjoyed in their diet. Some say it was largely maize, beans, and squash. while others insist the bustling markets provided a surprising diversity of flavors. From what you see and taste, it's a cuisine both practical and rich with subtle luxuries. You're offered a cup of atol, a warm maize drink flavored with honey and a hint of vanilla. You sip carefully, the sweetness coating your tongue, and you can't help but sigh. It's like the Aztec version of a latte, only far more wholesome. Nearby, a group of men sit with small clay bowls of cacao drink. They sip it slowly, savoring the bitterness mixed with chili and water. You're offered a taste, and the flavor surprises you, rich, spicy, and a little smoky. It's nothing like modern hot chocolate. You nod politely, though part of you wishes for a sprinkle of sugar. The men chuckle, clearly amused by your hesitant expression. One quirky recipe catches your eye. Tamales wrapped not in corn husks, but in avocado leaves, steaming gently in a clay pot. The cook explains they're filled with beans and chilies, perfect for carrying on long journeys. You take a bite, the leaf imparting a subtle herbal flavor that lingers pleasantly. Children run past, carrying small baskets of roasted amaranth seeds, popping them into their mouths like modern popcorn. One boy offers you a handful, his grin wide. You taste the tiny seeds, crunchy and slightly nutty, and realize you're snacking on something both ancient and timeless. As you sit on a low bench savoring another tortilla, you overhear a debate among a group of elders. They argue, good-naturedly, about whether it's better to grind maize on a metate early in the morning or later in the day when the air is cooler. You smile, realizing some kitchen debates never change. Historians would probably nod knowingly at the scene, the daily bread of life, prepared with love and a hint of stubborn preference. The meal continues with more dishes passed your way. A clay bowl of roasted squash blossoms, tender and lightly salted, a stew of beans with epizat, its herbal flavor sharp but comforting, even a little roasted turkey, its skin crisp and savory. Each bite feels like a story, a connection to centuries past. And then, just when you think you can't eat another morsel, someone offers you a small cake made of amaranth and honey. Sweet, chewy, and satisfying, it feels like dessert and ritual all at once. You close your eyes as you chew, letting the flavors linger. As the sun begins to dip slightly, casting long shadows over the chinampas, you realize the meal isn't just nourishment. It's community, ritual, and gratitude, wrapped into every tortilla and shared with a generosity that humbles you. You lean back, the warmth of food settling comfortably in your belly, and listen to the sounds around you. Laughter, the sizzle of maize on the commel, the splash of water as someone rinses a clay pot. It's the soundtrack of a world where food is life, sacred, practical, and shared. You thank your hosts for the meal, stepping back into a canoe that rocks gently under your weight. The paddler pushes off, guiding you down a canal that threads through another patch of chinampas. The air feels cooler now, shaded by willow branches, and you notice a new cast of neighbors, creatures that share these floating gardens with the Aztec farmers. The first to greet you is a heron, tall and elegant, standing motionless at the water's edge. Its long neck cranes forward, eyes fixed on the ripples below. Then, sudden as a blink, it strikes, pulling a wriggling fish from the canal. The bird swallows it whole and resumes its statue-like pose as if nothing happened. You watch in awe, though you can't help but think, if patience were an Olympic sport, this heron would take gold. A chorus of croaks rises from the reeds, where fat frogs lounge half-submerged. Every now and then, one leaps with a splash, startling a dragonfly that zips off in a flash of red. The buzzing of their wings mixes with the hum of bees drifting lazily from flower to flower. You lean back in the canoe, listening to the natural symphony, equal parts soothing and lively. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs deliberately encouraged certain animals on the chinampas, or whether the wildlife simply adapted to the gardens. Either way, the place feels alive in every sense. The animals aren't just visitors, they're part of the ecosystem, each playing a role in keeping the balance. Then you spot something unusual in the shallow water, a small, pinkish creature with frilly gills, paddling slowly along the bottom. Your guide grins and whispers, "Axolotl." You lean closer, fascinated by its strange, smiling face. These creatures, nicknamed walking fish, never grow out of their larval stage. The Aztecs considered them both a delicacy and a creature of myth, tied to the god Xolotl. You can't help but chuckle softly. It looks like a Pokemon before Pokemon existed. Nearby, a boy crouches at the edge of the water, cupping an axolotl carefully in his hands before letting it slip back into the canal. He laughs when it wiggles free, his joy as bright as the sunlight glinting off the water. You smile, remembering how children everywhere can't resist trying to catch the uncapturable. A sudden rustle overhead makes you glance up. A flock of parrots flutters through the branches, their feathers flashing green and red. They squawk noisily, as if discussing the day's gossip, then settle in the willows to preen. One imitates a human laugh so convincingly that you glance around, half expecting to see someone hiding nearby. The family in the next canoe laughs too. They've clearly trained the bird to join in their jokes. A quirky moment catches you off guard. A turtle sunning itself on a log, completely still, until it notices you watching. It slides into the water with a plop, vanishing like a magician's trick. You chuckle, thinking it probably has better things to do than star in your sleepy canal safari. The air carries the mixed scents of wet reeds, blooming marigolds, and faint smoke from a distant cooking fire. You take a deep breath, the fragrance grounding and oddly soothing. It feels like the whole chinampa world is breathing with you, in and out, slow and steady. Your guide points to a small mound of earth at the corner of a chinampa. He explains it's home to insects used as natural fertilizers. Some families even harvest certain insects for dyes or food. Historians still debate whether this practice was widespread or more experimental, but you nod thoughtfully, impressed by how nothing here seems wasted. As the canoe drifts onward, you realize how much life shares this place. Farmers, children, birds, fish, frogs, even strange little axolotls smiling up at you from the water. It's not just human ingenuity that makes the chinampas thrive, it's the harmony between people and nature, each relying on the other. The sun filters through the willows, warm on your face, and the sounds of croaking frogs and squawking parrots blend into a lullaby. You close your eyes briefly, letting the world rock you gently towards sleep, knowing the gardens will keep humming with life long after you drift away. And now, as the night settles over the chinampas, the paddles rest, the fires burn low, and the waters of the Great Lake fall still, it's time to let your own eyes grow heavy. Imagine the willows swaying gently in the breeze, the soft chorus of frogs along the canals, and the faint glow of marigolds guiding dreams into the quiet. You've walked the floating gardens, shared in their harvest, and listened to the heartbeat of a world long gone, yet still alive in memory. Now, allow yourself to drift with the calm rhythm of the lake, knowing the gardens will keep floating, tending themselves while you sleep. Thank you for joining me here on History Podcast. Rest well, dream deeply, and until we meet again on the next sleepy journey, sweet dreams.